Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Inferno cast. This is episode 59. I am Fox, host of the podcast and of YouTube's Inferno Fox Gaming channel. Inferno Fox Gaming, of course, it has content regarding RPGs, Nintendo, and retro gaming. And the Inferno cast is here on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Friendly reminder to moderate video game playing, touch grass, and help your partner, parents, or roommates around the house. Regarding touch grass, if you are in the Chicagoland area, I do recommend that you check out the Basement of the Dead Haunted House system that is located in Aurora, Illinois. That again is Basement of the Dead. This is spooky time. This is spooky season. So if you're on the area, I absolutely recommend checking that haunted house and area out. It is a lot of fun. And if you like jump scares that are IRL in real life, Basement of the Dead has got you covered. And joining us today for our special topic of Castlevania, we have the Mad Belmont, because you cannot have a Castlevania podcast if we do not have the definitive source for all things Castlevania. We're going to make sure that links to his YouTube site will be in the description below for Castlevania content and much more. So, Mad, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, man. It's good to be here.
And we're definitely excited to have you jump in and join us. Speaking of joining us as well, we've got our fantastic Inferno cast as well. And it's starting off with Astrimedes. He is a developer and co-owner of Second Place Games. Astrimedes, thank you so much for joining.
Happy to be here talking about spooky games.
That's right, because October is Spooktober. We are talking about spooky games, and as the month goes on, we're talking more and more spooky games. We also have, and speaking of spooky, Jason the 13th of the YouTube channel, Jason the 13th. Jason, thank you so much for joining us,
Not a problem at all. Always happy to be here.
and always happy to have you join. We also have Jamie Owls 87, my partner and partner in crime. Last week, we had released a video of games we are playing. So if you're interested in hearing what we have finished, currently playing, and are set to try in the future, check that out on Inferno Fox Gaming. Jamie Owls, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here, and I'm also in my element because it's the month of October and it's my favorite month.
And it is quite spooky out there. Very, very fall-like, because
Mhm.
fall just happens to be your favorite season, right?
All year round. And Christmas.
And last but not least, we have Stormrosesky of the Twitch and YouTube channels of Stormrosesky. Storm, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And speaking of spooky, you still have the Storm's top three horror franchises. Don't mind the movement in the background. That is just the resident husband doing something over somewhere. If you heard the sound, he was moving our step stool so he could look at our tech stuff. So, all right, but yes, check out the video Storm's top three horror franchises, and I like Jamie Owl's Love October, so
Mhm.
it is a wonderful month.
And you can catch that video that Storm has posted on her YouTube channel in the description below, where we've got her content linked. Also linked is the content for Simbu Darkfang, who is off tonight. He is the host of live streaming video games gameplay on the Scurryface channel. Again, link in the description below. And also off is our good friend and resident hill slut, that is Hillbilly Hardicus. But tonight we are talking all things Castlevania, and not just the first entry, aptly named, Castlevania, but the series itself. I want to touch briefly upon this first entry, just to kind of give the history lesson here. It premiered on the Famicom Disk System back on September 26th of 1986, and it featured savable progress. We got this entry on the NES here in North America, March of 87, with no available progression saving of any kind. Now, the game itself wasn't really long, but it is known to be quite difficult, much like many of the NES hard games of the time. This first entry, this is where it gets interesting. This first entry has seen a number of ports, like the Versus arcade version, also released in '87, mobile phone and Game Boy Advance ports in the aughts. You got the Virtual Console stuff in the aughts and late teens for the Wii and Wii U. And then its most recent appearance on the Castlevania Anniversary Collection that is currently available on all current consoles. And it also received, so not only are there ports, but there's like iterations of it, like other versions of it. It received a more like Metroidvania inspired version on a Japanese computer system called the MSX2. And that has never been ported before, which I'm kind of surprised. I would love to see them either port that or remake and port that, but it also got an absolutely awful arcade follow-up called Haunted Castle. Thankfully, they did remake that completely on the Castlevania Dominus collection, which just released, I believe, like last month. And interesting as well, there was also a remake of the first Castlevania for the Sharp X68000 home computer. We know this last one as Castlevania Chronicles for the PS1. That's how that got ported. And I guess you could technically say that Super Castlevania 4 is a remake of this OG game too, but I want to kind of take the Super Castlevania 4 out of this. Just want to gauge Astrimedes. I'm going to bug you first. Out of all of these original versions of the Castlevania game, have you played any of them? And if so, what are some of your favorite and not so favorite moments with this game?
So Castlevania 1, I played a decent amount of on the original NES hardware. I played it a little bit to remind myself in preparation for the podcast here too, how it feels. I believe I may have played it on a virtual console too, Wii Virtual Console at some point, but I like Castlevania 1. I think for the time it's a very like moody game. Um I think it's also really difficult. The way the movement works is very like stiff in a way that a lot of those old games are, particularly, the jump is probably what everyone knows as being like the obnoxious thing in Castlevania. So they definitely establish that and screw you with it a lot of times in Castlevania 1. So I mean, I think the most memorable parts are probably the most frustrating parts, like probably individual scenes with Medusa heads coming at you from two directions and that sort of thing. So honestly, that's probably the most memorable. Even though I do think it's a good game, I also think it's a very frustrating game.
No, that's totally understandable. Mad, I want to ask, how many of those different versions that I mentioned have you played?
I have played, of course, the original NES release, rented it as a kid, played the virtual console release on the 3DS because I had a 3DS at one point. I did not play the Wii U virtual console release because I didn't have one of those, but I have played obviously the anniversary collection version, which is what I was holding up there, and I have played the MSX2 port because my cousin had that on his PC when I was a kid.
Ooh.
Uh, I also played Castlevania Chronicles. I rented that as well back in the day, and I want to play the X Sharp 68000 version, the original release of that, even though I know it's the same thing in Chronicles. But hey, I still want to get them all under my belt.
Nice. That's
And then
that's
Haunted Castle as well. I played that as well.
oh yeah. Yeah, I'm almost right. Actually, I've missed out on the Castlevania Chronicles and the MSX2 version, so you are two ahead of me there, my friend. Although I did Jason the 13th, I thought you had the Game Boy Advance version of Castlevania because I remember I played. I don't own the Castlevania version of the Game Boy Advance, but I played it. Uh, I don't know if you do. Do you have the Game Boy Advance version of the NES port?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm wondering how
Um,
the heck I played it. Well, what
I'm
versions of this did you play the original Castlevania?
Oh yeah, I played the first two without a problem. I'm sketchy if I played 3, but I do know I had Castlevania 4 on the Super NES too.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember if where I would have gotten that experience from playing the Game Boy Advance version. I'm not quite too sure. Jamie Owls, I'm gonna skip you on this question because I know you haven't played the OG NES one.
Mm-mm.
You've probably seen me play it a few times. And
Yeah.
Storm, I before we started the podcast, we talked about how you hadn't played a lot of the Castlevania, but have you watched husband play any of this original Castlevania at all?
No, not in any recent time. So I've not seen him play it at all. So my experience with the whole series is again locked up in the Netflix uh TV show. So
Yeah, and
that's
we'll
about it.
definitely be touching upon that. Absolutely.
So I'm glad we're here. I'm here to learn and you know, excited that Matt Belmont is here because I think he's awesome. So I'm glad he's on our cast to join us today and educate me. There you go.
Yes. Yeah, and it's the OG Castlevania. Was one of the first games that one of the many of the first games we played back when we got the NES in May of '87. Um, I remember playing that with obviously with your husband and because of my two older brothers, and that being what we called one of the hot summer games, where that summer was really hot, so we would just stay indoors in the nice cold air conditioning, just play video games all summer while taking breaks and swimming in the apartment pool. So it's funny how Castlevania can and these games can kind of have you go down memory lane, as it were. But Castlevania, this first entry wasn't, fortunately, of course, wasn't the end. Konami gave us plenty of Castlevania to Nintendo during the classic 8 and 16-bit era. This includes a total of 3 NES games, 3 Game Boy games, 2 SNES titles, but Konami also branched out to other consoles, such as the Genesis entry with Castlevania Bloodlines, and to the PC Engine CD, to us Americans or North Americans. That's the TurboGrafx CD, Castlevania Rondo of Blood. And I'm going to remind a gentle reminder that all but Rondo of Blood and one of the 2 SNES games, they are all, again, on the Castlevania Anniversary Collection. The PS4 only Castlevania Requiem has Rondo of Blood, and Castlevania Advance Collection has Castlevania Dracula X. That's the other Super Nintendo Castlevania game. So one of the things that I'm going to ask Jason the 13th, you had said that you've only played the Super Castlevania 4 on the Super Nintendo out of all those Castlevania games I mentioned.
Well, and the first 2 on the NES.
Yes.
But yep, that's about the limit of the ones I've played.
So I got to ask you, just based on that, which one of those Castlevania games is the hardest that you played?
Ooh. Probably the original. I mean, it came out in Super Nintendo. I was older, it was a little bit easier to play, and and speaking of the frustrating stuff, I do remember having issues walking up staircases in one of the games.
Oh yeah.
Having to hit it on that right angle as you go up or down and missing it a lot.
I can definitely understand it and appreciate that with some of these. Mad,
Doing
hang on there.
stairs and ladders is, sorry, I just want to mention it because doing stairs and ladders in platformer games can be painful. And every time I play a game with stairs or ladders, I always think about how they're handling it. It's almost always awkward. So I always try to think of the controls. It's always an interesting little design challenge.
No, I hear you there. Matt, hang on for 1 second because you and I are going to be debating once I get to you. But Astrimedes, have you played any of these 8 or 16-bit entries? And if so, which one was the hardest?
So I played, I guess, all of the NES entries. I played Castlevania 1, 2, and 3 on the NES. 3, I played the most of 2, so I think we actually owned. Um, 2 is actually a kind of a fun, memorable, early kind of gaming experience for me because I remember there was another kid in our Cub Scout troop that had Castlevania 2, and being such a weirdly opaque and full of secrets and kind of even things that aren't a secret are surprisingly obscure, the way they give you the clues in some cases. There was a lot of like secret exchanging going on. So we'd show up to our weekly den meeting or whatever it was, and then often it would be, me, my brother, and the other kid who had Castlevania, like, talking and literally writing stuff down that we told each other about. Oh, it's you're supposed to give the guy garlic or whatever. That was a pretty easy one, but there's yeah. So Castlevania 1, 2, and 3, I played a good amount of. 2 probably the most. I think 3 maybe is the hardest. In terms of like I would say kind of like for different reasons, and maybe you can just put it in the unfair category. I would say Castlevania 2 for those reasons I mentioned. Some of the stuff is for like a good action game, it is also like weirdly almost like an adventure game with how much kind of find the thing over here and it's the key to let you get to the next part over here. It is like much more so than a usual simple kind of key and door stuff you see in games like that. So yeah, I'd say 3 is really hard. 3 is great, but really hard is my impression. Two actually is great for other reasons too, even though it's like weirdly opaque and all that stuff. It has definitely its own strengths. But yeah, I'd say 3 on like a raw, how hard is it to play and win felt like the hardest one to me.
Nice. Yeah, it's interesting the level of difficulties with 1, 2, and 3, where the 2 you have sort of that artificial difficulty just due to the villagers can lie and
Yep.
literally send you in the wrong direction when it's probably more so a thing like, okay, maybe it's a mistranslation where you have people English being their second language and they're doing English like how Final Fantasy 2 US was. But yeah, and it's funny where we of course have a larger discussion, myself, Matt, and a few special guests on a video premiering this Friday on Inferno Fox Gaming on YouTube, where we talk about that and more. So I want to, I'm using that as a segue to begin my discussion with the Mad Belmont, because this is where we got pretty much all the chips on the table here. So first I'm asking you, Mad, of course, have you played all of the 8-bit and 16-bit era games that I have mentioned?
I have. The only sore spot in the entire series for me was those DS games, but thanks to the Dominance Collection, that's no longer a problem. And yeah, so I played all those. I have played a lot of the spin-offs, even Judgment. And I've also played like I said before, a lot of the different versions of Castlevania 1. So there's not a whole lot of soft spots in this franchise for me.
So I'm going to ask you, and again, we're going to focus on the 8-bit and 16-bit era, the NES, SNES, Game Boy, Genesis, PC, CD Engine. You're getting the question. This is a two-parter. Which one is the hardest? Which one is the most unfair?
Okay, man, this is definitely a decision because there's two I have in mind here. It's one that I actually said in the discussion that we had with those other guests about Castlevania 2, and I still feel that the hardest one is Rondo of Blood. I tell this to my teammates on the Super Retro Force. Shout out to you guys all the time. And I tell them because Rondo of Blood is hard. You try to 100% that game, do all the alternate stages and everything, especially if you try to do it with Richter. It's hard because Richter, not only does he move like all the other Belmonts, slow, and he is pretty stiff, but that game demands skill out of you. It does. It feels like an arcade game in platformer form on a home console. It demands a lot of skill out of you. It demands a lot of stage knowledge. It demands knowing where the enemies are, knowing how your weapons and your sub weapons work. All that stuff goes into it. And then you've got alternate stages. You've got alternate boss fights. You've got get certain keys to go and unlock a door so that you can rescue someone. There's all that stuff in that game.
Oh man.
Unfair. Definitely the crown goes to Castlevania 3. That game is literally, I say this again to my boys in the Super Retro Force all the time. I say that game is basically screw you, the game. It's literally just throwing everything it possibly can at you, and you just got to deal with it. Especially if you're a masochist like me that plays as Trevor the whole time.
Yeah, because it's cool with 3 where you can switch between Trevor Belmont to either Grant or Sypha or Alucard, and each of them have their own like special abilities and everything like that. And I think the Sypha playthrough is probably one of the easiest, especially with her powerful spells. Um, I'm like you, man, where I've played it probably twice through, once when I was a kid, and then once like a couple years ago, only as Trevor. So I'm gonna be honest, I've never played it as any of those other 3 characters, but yeah, that's absolutely. I think that's probably the hardest and most unfair for me because that's got all the fun that Astrimedes was saying too with the stairs and everything. You got to deal because it feels just like okay, it is a literal sequel to Castlevania 1 where it takes the existing type of gameplay and just moves that into that. Except okay, here's literally like double the levels and more types of monsters. Oh, and did you like the Grim Reaper battle? That was such a pain in the ass in the first one. Here it is, except now it's 2 phases, and you got a giant skull that is just flying into the screen and off the screen, and then Dracula is in 3 parts. And oh my gosh, like if you thought the first game's Dracula could be cheesed with the holy water, yeah, you're not going to get that with Castlevania 3. There's no cheese. The mouse is going to starve in that.
Oh
Um,
no.
I'm gonna ask you out of the 8 and 16-bit era, Mad, which one has the best soundtrack?
Hmm. There's a lot of goodness there because Castlevania is one of those franchises that even if the game sucks, the soundtrack's gonna slap. So
Hmm.
I've always said it, Super Castlevania 4.
Really?
Yeah. That I put that soundtrack on probably more than any other soundtrack from that era. Not in the franchise, but from that specific era. I put Super Castlevania 4 on all the time.
I have if I'm gonna say individual song in the 8 and 16-bit era, it's Simon's theme from Super Castlevania 4.
That's a good one.
That I probably think that's one of the best, probably top 3, maybe even the number 1 out of the entirety of the Castlevania series. Simon's theme. It is. I have no words for it. But I'm gonna counter your 4 with 1. I think the first one, the entire soundtrack to 1 slaps up to and including the Famicom version's save screen, where I had not ever heard this theme until like 5 years ago when I found out that there was a Famicom save version and it actually had music in the background. I'm like, wow, even for this being a little menu screen that's like a little 10-second loop, this is pretty good. Like every single song, and I remember when I was learning the guitar, I would learn the tabs to every single song in the first Castlevania because it was just fantastic. And there might be people who could counter us with 3, and 3 has great music, but I think like if you go by the percentages, all the songs in the first one was good, but like some of the ones in 3 are a little dour, kind of like, and then especially the one theme when um the stones are dropping from the sky, and you got to drop jump, and it's like, that's not really that. I'm used to the Castlevania music being like a certain energy or whatnot.
That theme
I
drives
want to
me
say
crazy.
two. I want to say Castlevania 2 actually
What?
is a pretty great soundtrack. Isn't that the first time Bloody Tears shows up as in 2?
Yes, yes,
Two
it
has
is.
Bloody Tears, and even like the town music, like it's pretty great. Like, and it's kind of like I feel like, and I haven't played much of the SNES ones, but like to me, the soundtracks of those start to feel a little more kind of like distinctly 90s and stuff. Whereas I find like the 8-bit ones have a more sort of timeless kind of sound to them. That would be my take. And yeah, for whatever reason, I just think two, they're all great. Don't get me wrong. Like one, two, and three. Three probably does have the most kind of like repetitive and comparatively lazy songs, it felt like. And I didn't actually play a ton of three. I did watch a lot of playthrough of three on YouTube. I hadn't even seen a lot of the gameplay for a lot of those characters. So that was pretty neat to see how incredibly varied and very unfair the gameplay does look to get much later in the game. But yeah, to me, like, I don't know what two probably has less songs than a lot of the other ones, but I just feel like everything into is great. And just with the whole shift to night and the soundtrack changing, it makes it like very effective on top of it being like such a great song on its own. So yeah, for me, I would argue two probably in
No,
my
it's
home.
that's definitely a pretty good argument. But just for me, Bloody Tears would probably be my number two song in the Castlevania series, is because it's iconic at this point, and since Castlevania 2, Bloody Tears has been in almost every single Castlevania game, either as a stage song or as a, hey, here's the music test and here's our version of Bloody Tears. So,
It's for a
uh,
reason. Yep.
so one of the things with, because we're talking to classic Castlevania, and specifically with 2 and Bloody Tears, and then of course 3, we mentioned Trevor Belmont, and I mentioned Sypha. One of the coolest things, and I'm gonna jump around on my order here, was the fact that we got to see that story get played out in like a sort of live anime styling, where we saw that all within the Netflix Castlevania series, where 4 seasons, and those watching and on YouTube, it is over Mad's right shoulder, the Castlevania series, and that's an art book too, right?
Yep, this big thing right here, that's the art book, and then right next to it, I have season one.
Nice. So the Castlevania series, I'm gonna steal the thunder here. I think the Castlevania TV series is pretty great. They did a great job. There's one flaw with the Castlevania series on Netflix, and I will leave that to the end of our discussion of this TV series. But it's been pretty great because it adapts a lot of the music within it, especially the end of season 1, where Trevor fights one of the characters, and a variation of Bloody Tears plays, which is pretty phenomenal to hear. As well as the fact that, like, not only did it continue the story of Castlevania 3 afterwards, but through a couple curves, and actually made Dracula sort of that identifiable, like, you can kind of get where he's coming from with his mission, as crazy as that sounds. You kind of get why he did and does what he with that. So I'm going to ask Storm, your thoughts on the Netflix Castlevania series.
Oh, I thought it was funny, fantastic, and that's one of my favorite parts is what you just hit on, was that you start to understand the drive behind Dracula and why he's doing the things that he's doing. It made me want to check out the video games more, but that I'm not great at platform games, so that's why it's been put to the back burner a lot because I'm not great at them, and hearing how hard some of those things are, no. That's a hard no. But well, maybe not a hard no. But anyway, no, It was good. We watched the first season and then we couldn't wait to watch the next couple. And outside of I have no knowledge of Castlevania to begin with, so it really sucked me in, and it was a good story overall. So even if you're not a fan of the series, the video game series, the Netflix show is a decent watch, and people should check it out. It's fun to see those characters from a different point of view, and I like writing vampires and stuff like that, so I enjoyed it that much more, and it helped give me some ideas. So, you know, art imitates art a lot of the time, but in a good way.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, I was really glad to hear that you guys enjoyed that series. I was like you after the first, because the first season is only 4 episodes, and when that ended, I'm like, really? That's it?
Yep.
You hooked us in, and I kind of felt that way after the second Castlevania series, Castlevania Nocturne, because that season ended, and it was like a sort of a cliffhanger, sort of like a thing. But we'll get to that. Focusing more on the first Castlevania Netflix series of 4 seasons. Jason the 13th, did you ever see those? Did you get to watch them?
I have not gotten to watch any of it on Netflix.
Blasphemy.
I've only heard good things about the show.
He's fired.
Ah.
Get
Fired.
on it. Get on it.
Mhm.
I got homework now.
I've heard
Yes.
that you're gonna be house sitting over the weekend. This
Yes,
weekend.
I am.
Maybe you should go on that friend's TV and check out their Netflix and watch the Castlevania there, because that would be a really good watch for you. Really good watch
Yeah.
for you. Jamie Owls, what were your thoughts on the Castlevania Netflix series?
I thought they were good. I've only played one game of the Castlevania series, and I knew about it, and I just never really got into the series. And I'm like Stormrose with any of the classic platform games. I'm not like interested in, but I'm open in trying them. But it's not on my list anytime soon that I'll be playing them, but it would be something I'll be open to. But I think the shows were great. It introduced me a lot to all the characters that I weren't familiar with. Like I knew who Belmont was, of course, and understanding Dracula and why he did or why he became what he did, and I thought it was good. I look forward to the next series that's coming out next year, which I was hoping that this month it would have come out because it would have been a fun show to watch in October.
Right?
Yeah, they're really good. It's just I also thought it'd be a good introduction for people who have never played the games either, or people in the younger generation that may not be familiar with the Castlevania series, that they can get into the games and see what they think for themselves, unless their parents haven't told them yet. So.
Nice, yeah. Astrimedes, how about you? Did you catch the Netflix Castlevania?
Yeah, I did. I liked it, and I'll echo what Storm said. I liked the fact that they gave kind of Dracula a backstory, and that kind of thing. And it's probably me reaching, but there's a very kind of like weird and dark old Japanese animated movie called Belladonna of Sadness, and like something about Dracula's I won't get into detail of what it is. If anyone's interested, look at what it is. But there's kind of like it's a tragic kind of revenge story sort of thing. And it reminds me somehow, like in a very kind of like vague way, that it almost feels like they're going for that vibe with Dracula having this like, I have doomed myself in exchange for revenge sort of kind of like attitude. But yeah, I thought that was really strong. I'm not like a big anime fan. I don't hate it, but I don't really watch anything unless it's kind of like exceptional for kind of on its own merits, not just because it's anime is kind of my attitude. But yeah, I watched this out of curiosity, and I watched the first episode and surprised myself by ended up watching the whole season. I only watched that first season so far. But yeah, I liked it. I was impressed by it. I liked As mentioned, how they kind of incorporated the music was pretty neat. But yeah, overall, I liked mainly kind of like the fleshing out of Dracula, just because it's good storytelling in general. Like when the villain doesn't think they're the villain and they have justifications for what they're doing, it's always kind of like a better, more complex, like richer story.
That's very true. Sort of like the whole Thanos thing. Although, no, yeah, but it's kind of like that. Thanos wanted to limit life.
He
Dracula,
wasn't wrong.
yeah, Dracula just wanted to end all life because he thought humanity itself was just so sick and perverted, and the proof of that was them unable to find their own type of redemption to be able to in a year's time. He gave them a year, and a year later they couldn't prove that. And all right, Dracula's got to, flex his muscle, as it were, with all his various monsters and whatnot. Um, Really sort of it also speaks to the power that one can have with love itself, and the whole love and loss, and where that leads to somebody. But Mad, I'm not gonna ask you such an easy question. I'm gonna have your reaction to my big issue with the Castlevania TV show series. My biggest issue with the Castlevania TV show series is with Konami itself. You guys, Konami, 'cause you guys are, because you are listening to my podcast, because you guys are everywhere. You release this anime series, and it is successful, very successful, where Netflix likes to cancel stuff, on a drop of a hat. It's got 4 seasons, and technically a fifth, if you count Nocturne, and a sixth coming on its way. You got all this Castlevania stuff. Where is the new entry? Where is the new Castlevania game? You're gonna have such a popular new series that gets a lot of newbies, such as Jamie Owls and Storm, and those who are familiar with the name and this, and just like the name itself in some of the older games, like Astrimedes. You're getting these people into the series, and you don't have a game ready. That's the biggest negative with the TV series, and that one I'm putting right on Konami's feet. I get you're too busy with those pachinko machines. You got to make those Japanese gamblers. But yeah, come on, Konami. Mad, what are your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more with you. Oh my goodness, dude. I'm telling you, like, I said this during the original run of the show, then during Nocturne. You have a series here that has penetrated the cultural zeitgeist like none of these games have been able to do, and you don't capitalize on it. Really? You really don't capitalize on it? Not to mention some of the gripes that I have with the series, but that's, for another day. But you have, like I said, all this attention that's being brought to Castlevania thanks to this anime, and no new games. All you want to do is just release collections, which is fine. It's totally fine. But there is some clamoring for a new entry, specifically from me and everybody else in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got a taste of that with Haunted Castle Revisited. But again, that's just a remake. That's not a evergreen new title. And while we're at it, don't give us mobile crap. We don't want mobile crap. I mean, I get that you're a Japanese company, and that's like the Japanese company thing to do, to give us mobile crap. But we don't want mobile crap. You don't have to do a whole triple A budget buster sort of a thing to be able to have any sort of go forward with the series. Like, get Mercury Steam to do it, because Mercury Steam. Am I saying that right, Matt? Mercury Steam.
Mercury's theme.
Okay, because I'm like, I was kind of questioning myself there, because we're going to branch now into the realm of 3D Castlevania, because Mercury Steam has some roots in that. Um, they made the 2010 Castlevania Lords of Shadow game. This was a Castlevania game that was outside of the as we know it, Castlevania universe. It ended up becoming its own sort of reboot or like sort of universe or what have you. But 3D Castlevania, I'm going to admit this is my weakest portion with Castlevania. I've only played 2D Castlevania. I probably played Castlevania 64 maybe like for about an hour or something like that. That Castlevania was the first 3D one released in 1999 for the Nintendo 64. It got, well, I'm going to call it an upgrade. It got an upgrade with Castlevania Legacy of Darkness because that like adds prequel content, more refinement to that first 64 title. Then you had Lament of Innocence in 2003, and you had Curse of Darkness in 2005. And these, again, all those Castlevania games that I just said, besides Lords of Shadow, those all stayed within the Castlevania universe. Lords of Shadow, again, created by Metroid Dread's Mercury Steam, set in its own universe. And that got its own controversial sequel in 2014, Lords of Shadow 2. And what's crazy is that is the last 3D Castlevania title in the series, and not counting mobile crap, that's the last new Castlevania game 10 years ago. So, Jamie Owls, I'm gonna ask you to I'm gonna pluck your memory strings here to get your thoughts when you played Lords of Shadow, and I think you played it on the PS3, right?
I think it was the
Ah,
Xbox.
the
It was
360, you're
your
right. I'm
friend
sorry.
who let me borrow it, and it was an Xbox version. I'm gonna be honest, it's been a long time. I From what I recall, the graphics were really good. I can't really tell you the storyline, but I did enjoy playing it because it was more of a 3D type game to where I can easily play more than a platforming. It was creepy. I thought it was a lot of fun, and now that we're talking about it, I really want to get back into playing that game. I do remember the spiders though, that creeped me out.
Oh my gosh. I remember you kind of being creeped out with the spiders on those. Don't play Hogwarts Legacy if spiders aren't your
Mm-hmm.
thing. Yeah, that's a
Yuck.
whole thing there too. Um, so I gotta ask, Mad, you've played all of the 3D Castlevanias, right? What are your thoughts on
Absolutely.
them?
I have played all of them, and as I was just showing you there, I do have finally physical copies of Lament and Curse, two of my favorite entries in the entire franchise. I love these two to death. But as far as Lords of Shadow goes, I have played all of them. Lords of Shadow 1, Mirror Fate 2. And I like one. One is good. I don't like the ending, but I like most of it. And then Mirror Fate's good. It's kind of like you can tell that that's where Mercury Steam was kind of flexing their Metroidvania muscles, because that basically is what that game is. And then with two, the lead of that team basically got the biggest ego ever and basically just said, I know what I'm doing. None of the fans do. I'm going to do everything that they hate,
Mm.
basically. And so he sure as crap did it. And yeah, we let him know real quick how bad all of those decisions were.
And what sucks about that is the issue was with that entry, that specific entry, Lords of Shadow 2. It was not with the series, but Konami, in their infinite unwisdom, they took it as, oh, this is not such a lauded game. You guys aren't going to buy it. Fine, no more Castlevania. And then like that really felt like that was it until of course we started getting collections, which again, we are appreciative of the collections that they give us. We absolutely, well, I mean, I love them. Mad, you love them.
Yeah.
I would love a 3D collection. I'm not gonna lie, that's going to be the way that I'm going to play these, is if I get Castlevania 64, Legacy of Darkness, and especially I want to play Lament of Innocence and Curse of Darkness. I've Lament of Innocence, is that with Isaac and
Okay,
Hector?
okay, so Lament is with Mr. Leon Belmont that you
Leon
can see
Bellman.
right here
That's
on
the
the
first one
cover.
in the timeline, right?
Yes, this is the origin story right here. All
Okay.
your Belmont origin stories are right here. Curse is with Isaac and Hector. You play as Hector, and that's why that's what this game is the reason why I have a little bit of a gripe with him in the show.
Hmm.
What was the gripe with him and Hector in the show?
Because okay, so you play as Hector in this game, who is a killing machine, and he is not even a quarter of that in the show.
Oh, because he's a whiny baby.
Yeah,
That's fair. Although he does get with the Jessica Finley vampire, so that's good on him. That's good
uh,
on Hector. I mean, that if you're a Downton Abbey fan, that's the youngest of the daughters. So good on Hector. Good for you, Hector. But
yep.
yeah, I would really love to get a 3D collection, or how about let's get a remaster of Curse of Darkness and throw Lament of Innocence in there. Come on, Konami. Get what is it? M3. Were they the ones that have been doing the anniversary collections?
M2.
M2,
That's the
okay.
team, and they were actually the team that did Haunted Castle Revisited, by the way. And actually, if you have a PS3, you can buy Lament of Innocence on the PlayStation Store. I just did that not too long ago.
Okay. Nice. That'd be something to definitely look into and do, because yeah, I would love to be able to play those. Um, last part of our discussion as we work to wrap things up is going to be on the Metroidvania based Castlevania games. And we've seen early examples of this, kind of like what Astrimedes especially loves with Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest on the NES, and kind of what myself and Matt had mentioned with the MSX2 version of the OG Castlevania. But the genre of Metroidvania could not be defined as such had it not been for, and I'm pointing on YouTube here at the Castlevania Symphony of the Night on the PS1, released in 1997. Well, while Konami was developing Castlevania 64, they're developing that, making sure to throw the lion's share of the budget towards that entry. A smaller dev team and budget was given to make Symphony of the Night. And what was developed is probably one of the finest video games of all time, and it doesn't even feature a Belmont as the primary player protagonist, beyond the prologue, of course. So, Astromedes, I'll ask you, do you know of Castlevania Symphony of the Night? Have you played it at all? Anything like that?
Yeah, I've played it. I didn't own it back in the day, but I ended up borrowing it from someone at some point, and I believe I played through to kind of the first end. I didn't do the whole upside down castle thing or whatever, but I think I played through the end, which I don't actually do a lot in a lot of games. And yeah, I really liked it. I watched some YouTube videos recently because I don't have access to it, but I figured I'd watch some videos to refresh my memory a little bit about it. And I mean, my first observation was the music comes across as very like late 90s. But that was the first thing that kind of struck me. Also, it's hilarious that everyone or many people in the videos are just dashing around backwards constantly. That seems to be a thing people like doing as they play that game. But on a more kind of serious overall note, I do think the waiting to heal mechanic kind of sucks, to be honest. Like that would be the main kind of criticism I would probably level at it. Like in my mind, if something, it should just be like an instant heal when you're out of battle or something. If you want to do something like that, have it to where you can't heal during battle, which probably already happens. There's probably already a timer on it, but that would probably be like my main criticisms. But like it was a great game. I really remember enjoying playing it, and I think what was really good about it, it was a really nice blend. And this is probably what goes towards sort of defining the Metroidvania genre in some respects. But I mean, like, it was a really nice blend of both, like really kind of core actiony gameplay, but kind of like numbers and build sort of stuff going on with your equipment a little bit too. You could, I feel like that was, and maybe this is mistaken, but it felt like that was one of the earlier kind of games that people were playing a lot of, where like you're seeing the numbers of the damage because you're expected to kind of be looking at your equipment and adjusting and all that, or at least it felt like it was kind of rare to see games that were throwing numbers like that out there that were action based at the time. But yeah, it was a really great game all around. Like movement felt really fun. The whole like kind of dodge dash thing you could do. I mean, it felt really good. It looked really good. You felt all supernatural vampire-y when you did it. But it was a really good game. Really, really strong entry overall. Did find the music felt dated.
Now, how would you compare Symphony of the Night with any of the other Metroidvania games that you've played?
I mean, I think it's really solid in general. I don't remember, and I mean, this could be just that I don't remember them. I don't really remember being too frustrated at any point. I think the movement and combat felt fun enough, and I think this is kind of key in Metroidvanias. Like the movement, just kind of core movement, especially as you kind of learn new abilities and all that sort of stuff later, it felt fun on its own. So like in a game, in a genre where backtracking and stuff is very common, like if the movement feels fun, I think it's like players are kind of, they have a lot more tolerance for sort of backtracking and all that. And I think that's sort of just like a core game design principle in general, but particularly in a game where you're sort of expected to move from location to location, particularly if you've seen them before a lot, it's really important to do that. And I think this game really does nail that.
And what better way than to moonwalk and skid backwards all the way?
Yep. Turn into a bat for no reason over here. Do that crazy magic beam upwards over here and pass everyone up. And yeah, it does a really nice job of giving you more of those abilities as time goes on, and does establish kind of like a good core sort of feature of a lot of these games with those kind of movement ability acquisitions.
Yeah, and it just feels like that. Just you get the bad ability. Now you can access that pretty much almost anywhere vertically, and especially reaching places you couldn't before. Especially when you get the double jump. Well, it is seeing the ledge where you got to get up to get this item. And it's like really it's right there, and I can't freaking get it just because I can't jump high enough. It's like come on. But that's the whole base of the genre itself, and it's just fun to be able to explore the whole world and everything within there, which the Castlevania, these Metroidvanias, there's after Symphony of the Night, three additional ones released on the Game Boy Advance, and then also for the Nintendo DS after that. And it's essentially the same type of gameplay loop as Symphony of the Night, and there was a sort of a worry about it, kind of like that oversaturated sort of feel, like how Mega Man kind of got in the early to mid 90s. But then now when you look back 10 years after the fact and you're like, oh my God, there's only six Mega Man games on the NES and that's all that there is. And I want to play more, but I can't. I feel that way with all these Castlevania Metroidvania games, where thank goodness we've got Castlevania Requiem, where you can play Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night on the PS4. Thank goodness you can do the Advance Collection, where you can do all the Game Boy Advance ones on all major consoles. Same thing with the Dominus Collection with the DS ones on all major consoles, which loving that we got that the Dominus Collection as well as it being a stealth drop just to be able to play these DS games. There was like no way I could play them unless I'd pick up the cartridge. Let me shut up really quick though, and ask Jason the 13th, because you guys had a PS1, but I never got to play Symphony of the Night until I downloaded it on the PlayStation Network on my PS3 in like '06, or no, I'm sorry, like '07 or '08 for the first time. Did you guys ever have Symphony of the Night on the PS1?
I do not remember anyone ever owning that. Like I said, had the first two on the NES. We had the first one on the Super NES, but we never really got hooked into the series back then. And I don't remember ever having it on the PlayStation.
And that's so funny to me because like it can be like a scary type of a game with the whole
Mhm.
ambiance and everything like that. So like I would totally see that being something like your dad and
Oh, I
your
know.
brother picking up.
I know we were big into horror movies and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm surprised we didn't get into it more when we were younger.
So and of course, Mad, I gotta ask you, have you played Castlevania Symphony of the Night?
Oh, gee, I don't know. Maybe it's just, one of those games that I just play at least once a year type of deal.
You got to, you got to.
I love this game. It is not only my favorite Castlevania game, but it is my favorite game of all time. Love this game to death. I'm still jealous of you, by the way, with that freaking. I want that. I want that version.
I thought he played ET instead of Castlevania.
No, that would be Simbu.
No, that was Simbu.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
No, I'm not
That's right.
Simbu. I'm not Simbu.
No, nah,
Yeah.
he's not here for us to pick on him with ET today.
Oh, we'll still pick on him.
So it's your turn.
So it's my turn.
Even with him not here, we can still pick on him for that.
Yep.
Gosh, yeah, it is such a class. I'm that way, Mad, with Super Metroid. Like I usually like to do a playthrough of that once a year. That and like I think Final Fantasy IV. But in my old age, I play more new games now than I ever replay old ones, which is it's odd. Like you would think I'd want to do the comfort games, but no, I got to do new games. Got to do new games. Um, what are your thoughts, Mad, on the Game Boy Advance and DS Castlevania games in comparison to Symphony of the Night? Do they hold a candle? Do we not do that comparison? Are they their own beasts? Your thoughts on that?
I would say they definitely do in their own ways because they have the basis of what Symphony of the Night built, but they do their own things. Like you've got the uh, Circle of the Moon with the DSS system. You've got Harmony of Dissonance, which feels the closest to Symphony of the Night, just on a basic level, but you got the two different castles that you can go to. Then you've got Aria of Sorrow, which is one castle and you go through it, but you've got the souls that you can draw and get different abilities from those souls that you collect. So each one of those has their own things to it. And as I'm finding out with the DS games, they have their own things to it. Like Portrait of Ruin having the ability to either just play as one of two different characters or just having two characters at once with that. And then you've got, of course, Dawn of Sorrow, which is a continuation of Aria. Then you have the one that I have not gotten to yet, and that's because I'm trying to get through Portrait of Ruin, which is Order of Ecclesia with Shanoa, one of the few female leads in a Castlevania game. Need to do more of that, Konami. Anyway, one of the few female leads in the series, and apparently she is just a badass. She's someone that you can, that will melt people if you level her up right. I have no idea because I haven't played that one yet, but I'll find out. I'll find out here pretty soon.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. I'm sort of getting the idea that they have their own personalities, but they're just not Symphony of the Night. And I think it would behoove Konami to get Mercury Steam to do a brand new evergreen 2D Metroidvania Castlevania game. I think that seeing the pedigree of what they did with Metroid Dread, excuse me, I think it would be really good to have the Mercury Steam team do Metroid 6 and a brand new Metroidvania Castlevania type game. Although I'm wondering if they don't want to be typecast to that. They like to sort of spread their wings with other types of genres, but they do the Metroidvania so well. They really do.
Yeah. Yeah. Not to mention, after what they did to Castlevania with the Lords of Shadow games, they probably don't want to go nowhere near this franchise again, especially after the community, after the way that us as a community treated them back in the day with Lords of Shadow 2 specifically.
You're not wrong, but it's the old adage, like if you make something good, then you could tend to get good fans of stuff. But if you make crap, you're gonna get crap for it. I mean,
Yep.
Well, I mean, and arguably, it's kind of like an easy win too, right? Like and that's often what companies do when they see these situations. Oh, everyone lashed out about the new thing. Let's course correct and release something more like the old one. Like they can make a new game that is they can even keep it, fairly, similar to Symphony of the Night. And I mean, I feel like it would draw a bunch of people in, like we were just saying, a bunch of new people that haven't like kind of played any entries in the series, but have been kind of tangentially exposed to Castlevania content. Like I feel like it's sort of like a no-brainer where they could literally do the thing they did the first time with Symphony of the Night and even just have a smaller team release something. And even like I feel like people would even be happy with like a smaller game. Like seems like a no-brainer to release something like Symphony of the Night
Yeah,
at this point.
yeah. It's not going to press the budget either, and the whole thing just in at a macro level in the video game industry with a potential. I keep hearing collapse of AAA gaming. The sure bets are going to be AA experiences, and that's exactly
Yep.
where a 2D Castlevania entry is going to excel. You're going to have a good uh, ROI, especially with the fact that it can be on multiple consoles and whatnot. So
You could even be blatantly derivative. It's been so long since there's been a game that I feel like fans would be a lot more okay with the game being derivative but familiar rather than something, off-putting. I'm not someone who makes arguments for derivative stuff in general, but I'm really just making the point that again, it's kind of like a no-brainer. You can get away with a lot of just blatant copying of Symphony of the Night, throw in some changes. I mean, approach it like a lot of those DS games have or whatever, which I'm not really very directly familiar with.
no, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like we just need Konami to be able to get us some sort of new content that's not a new pachinko machine, slot machine. Yeah, keep spoiling us with collections. We'll buy them, but let's get some new entries and yeah, Jason.
So, small little thing to throw in while we're on this. Do you think it's kind of the companies are 50-50 on these kind of franchises where it's not their, oh, Mario that's going to instantly make them millions of dollars, but this one is it might flop, so we're afraid of doing this kind of game? Or is it just in the back burner and they've got so many other projects that they don't even think about it?
I think it's the latter, because the whole idea of making a AA game is not very cost prohibitive. It's not something like, see, I think Sega, I think it's cool that they're bringing back their whole thing. They're bringing back their old franchises, like literally old franchises with a new Shinobi game and a new Shinobi movie that was just announced this week, and a new Crazy Taxi and a new Jet Set Radio. And those are meant to be AAA experiences. Great, yay, but at the same time, that's a huge gamble. You're going to be putting AAA budgets towards these on what are essentially unknown entities where you got old dogs like us where we recognize the names. Maybe we'll be into them or not. Maybe we can get our kids to play them. It's not a sure bet, but with something with a AAA game where instead of a budget of 200 million, it's going to be maybe 2 million, 5 million, 10 million. A lot of the stuff that Team Asano does for Square Enix in Japan, stuff like Live Alive, Octopath Traveler 1 and 2, Triangle Strategy, those kind of things are not big budget games. And they celebrate when those hit a million sales because that essentially that makes their money back and then some. And that's the point. Like you have a new franchise, you have an existing franchise. Don't just sit on it because I mean don't be like a frickin' um what Embracer Group where you just own all of these franchises and hey, I own them, cool, but you're not going to do anything with them because you're hoping uh some sort of angel investor comes in and bails you guys out and gives you a bunch of money. You're essentially sitting on money and or potential money and not doing anything with it. It's like the risk reward scenario, but you're not gonna you're not gonna make money if you don't put the money out in so much of a way to where it's going to attract old dogs like us as well as those that could be curious with the series. No, that's a good question. Matt,
Yep,
what are your
because
thoughts on that?
Ah, man. You know, as far as that goes, I do think it is the latter. I think that they have a bunch of projects in the works and they're just, waiting for the right time to do it. But it also could be something that, it is Castlevania as a franchise. And I don't think any of y'all know this, but I went and looked at the raw sales data. Not a single game in this entire franchise, not a one, has even hit 2 million sales. Not a one. The closest one that came to it was Lords of Shadow 1 in 2010. It was 1.77 million. So they may be looking at that. That may be a factor, but also they could just have something in the works that they're not telling us about. And it's just not a priority. Like, for instance, Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid are.
Mhm.
Which those, if we can get Konami to be able to allow these game devs to do efforts like Silent Hill 2 Remake, which is one of I would say it's a game of the year contender, um, or what they're currently doing with Metal Gear Solid Delta, that is looking like it's going to be an absolutely fantastic remake. If they can do something like that, put those efforts in, not just in remakes, but just the sort of new stuff, I think we could see some really good action with this series. Because when you think about it, yeah, it might not have sold 2 million, but 2 million back then could be 3 to 4 million now with more people gaming as a whole. So it's an interesting discussion overall with Castlevania. We want to see more of it. And hopefully we'll be able to get that. Maybe 2025 we'll see some sort of a new reveal. Huge thank you again to the Mad Belmont for joining us for our Castlevania discussion. Again, you can catch him, again, the Mad Belmont here on YouTube for some really fun and fantastic Castlevania and more content, as well as pickups. He often joins Rad Bash Gaming on some of his live plays. Make sure you check out his YouTube group, Super Retro Force. That is also going to be linked in the description below. It's a group of excellent YouTube content creators for video games. A lot of fun there. And of course, also want to thank our fantastic cast and crew as we talked about Castlevania. Next week, we've got all of us here, including Matt, and maybe a guest or two more that'll be joining us to discuss Resident Evil. But before we go, parting shots.
It just dawned on me where Mad got the rest of his name from. When Jamie Owls mentioned Belmont earlier, I was like, oh, now it makes sense. It just, was going.
The
Belmont.
light bulb
Yes.
finally came on.
Yes, it did. I was like, oh, now I get it. Now I get it.
That's a don't forget to slide. Don't forget to slide.
Yes. Hey, at least I was unmuted this time while I'm talking to you. But yes, I get it now. Yay!
Oh, too funny. Matt, any parting shots?
I just want to say again, thank you for having me on. Thank you for shouting out the team. We are on the road to 1,000 subs on the team channel, which we're getting close. We're about 26 subs away from that. So hopefully we can get there pretty soon.
Yeah, you guys are doing an excellent job. Not only with the channel growth, but just like the content too. It's been a very comforting friend to have as I've been running on the treadmill like a gerbil doing marathon training. So that has been very helpful. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
And
man, this team is honestly the best thing that's ever happened to me. I love this team. We're 12 people that are super passionate about what we like to talk about, and I think it comes through in the videos.
oh, it does. Absolutely.
Mhm.
they're super fun to check out. So, and of course, thank you, our audience, for watching and listening. And we hope that you guys too have a spooky day.